Hey guys, Chris here. Tonight I'm a Carson Pass doing a hike. I got some brand new snowshoes. I'm testing them out, and we're going to be doing a story back in the studio. It's about a crew on the Alaskan pipeline in the 1970s, and they had a series of strange things happen to them while out in the Alaskan wilderness that led to the only conclusion was Bigfoot. That's next. All right, that was a lot of fun being up at Carson Pass snowshoeing. Brand new snowshoes. At the end of the video, I'm going to just talk about them for like 1 minute, if anybody's interested in that. So, all right, so for today's beer, we have from the Rogue Brewing Company out of Oregon, Hazelnut Brown Ale, and that is made from all natural hazelnut flavors, 5.6 ABV. It says on the can here, Hazelnut Brown Ale is rooted in Oregon's nut-rich soil and legacy, crafted with local pride. It is a nod to the land's flavorful treasures. So, pretty heavy-duty stuff, I guess. I don't usually like brown ales, but I thought I'd try this one. Oh yeah, very much a brown ale. I don't know if you can see that. And let's give it a shot here. Wow, really hoppy. And kind of a slow bitterness, and then it just goes away really quickly. And then you can taste this hazelnut flavor. It's almost a mocha kind of flavor to it. It tastes actually really pretty good. I thought it was going to be more overpowering with the hazelnut and the brown ale, but yeah, so Rogue Hazelnut. Cheers. In the 1970s, 1974 to be exact, they started building the Alaska pipeline. This pipeline ran from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, northern Alaska, all the way through the state to Valdez, Alaska. Almost 800 miles. It went over 5 mountain ranges, including the Brooks Range, extremely wild mountain range. There were 70,000 people that worked on this pipeline between 1974 and 1977. Incredible effort. And then once the oil got to Valdez, they would load it on the tankers and they would go to the West Coast with it or around the world wherever they needed oil. Ronald heard about jobs up in the pipeline in Alaska at this time, about 1975, and he was unattached, not married, and he heard there was fantastic pay to go up there and work. And he had been in auto repair, welding, and even worked on a fence crew, and he thought his skills could be useful. So he applied, got the job, and he went up to Prudhoe Bay to meet his employers. And right away he was welcomed, felt comfortable, and they put in the work really quickly. And he said the working conditions were pretty rough. Housing was really rough, but the pay was fantastic, so it was really worth it for him to do this. And he thought, you know what? This is working out so well, I think I'm just going to work on this till we finish the job. And so that's what he did. There were numerous crews working on the pipeline, all working together. They would bring in supplies on these dirt roads that paralleled the pipeline, and they would bring these pallets of nuts, bolts, pipe fittings, welding tanks, just all the supplies they needed to continue building this pipeline. Just an immense effort. It kind of reminded me of the 1860s where they were building the Transcontinental Railroad, bringing the two railroads together to build one continuous railroad. And there's just huge effort to do this. Several weeks into this, they were about 120 miles south of Prudhoe Bay. They showed up at the job site early one morning, and they saw that several of these pallets had been ripped open, torn into, and parts were missing. Now, these parts were specifically manufactured and engineered just for the pipeline. And somebody or something had come and removed them. They sent searches out looking for these parts, and they couldn't find them. To sell this stuff as scrap metal, there wasn't much of a market for that, and they could not use these materials anywhere else. Again, it was specifically engineered for the pipeline. And so they were really perplexed as what happened. Who came out here? They were in the middle of nowhere. Civilization's hundreds of miles away. There's no towns around. And so the boss assumed it was an indigenous tribe of people that were opposed to the pipeline. Maybe they came out and were trying to slow their efforts down, sabotage their work. This went on for several weeks. Just every few days, something would happen to one of these pallets. These materials would go missing. Some of these were heavy cast iron valve assemblies, hundreds of pounds, just gone, missing. And again, they would go out looking and expecting to find something, and they found nothing. So Ronald explained that there was this man on the crew, his name was Guy, a guy named Guy, and he had a telescope, and he was a really smart guy, and he loved astronomy and stargazing. And at night, after the work was done and they had dinner, he would go out and watch the stars. And occasionally, somebody from the crew would join him, and they would talk about stargazing and astronomy. And one night, this guy comes in, and he was really kind of excited. He was very animated. And he said he saw in the tundra at night, it was a moonlit night, with his telescope, he saw this large man walking in this clearing. Got everyone's attention, and he went on to explain that he said, yeah, this man was huge. He was like 9 feet tall, very dark, and he had to be wearing black coveralls. And right away, he got eye rolls and sarcasm. Instantly, Guy felt kind of embarrassed and then frustrated, and he was just feeling this pushback and mocking from people that he just was like, I don't want to deal with this, and he just went to bed. And Ronald remembered that, and he had never heard of Bigfoot before. This word Bigfoot was starting to go around camp. Just a couple weeks later, Ronald was working with his crew. It was lightly raining. There was a low cloud cover ceiling. And he noticed this commotion in the crew in front of him, 150 yards or so above them. And this crew was starting to gather together, and they were moving off to the left side of the pipeline, and they all appeared to be looking up at this small slope with some trees around it. Ronald worked his way up the pipeline to see what was going on, and there was talk of this large upright animal on 2 feet moving in and out of the trees, working its way up this slope. And that was the word. And several people from this crew saw this. Many of the crew saw it. And so he worked his way through the crowd, and he came to the other side, and he said, Where is it? And one of the men pointed up, and he said, right there, it stopped. It's staring right at us, but it stopped. And Ron looked, and he could see the trees, and he looked and scanned the trees, and he didn't see anything. And then he continued to look in this one spot, and he saw this silhouette of these large shoulders, and it appeared to be a head in amongst the trees. And had somebody hadn't pointed at it, he wouldn't have seen it. It blended in so well. And he said, what is it? Many people were talking, and they mentioned a bear, and then this guy from Oregon named Paul comes up next to him, and he says, it's a Bigfoot. And Ron said, what's a Bigfoot? And he'd heard rumors about this Bigfoot in the Northwest, but he didn't know anything about it. And this Paul proceeded to tell him, well, I worked in Oregon on a lumber crew doing work in the forest there in Oregon, and one day we heard some sounds coming from the forest, and there was this almost like talking, chattering sound, but it sounded like possibly somebody in duress, somebody in trouble. And so him and another guy decided to walk over to the forest and investigate, see if somebody needed some help. And as soon as they went into the forest about 10 yards or so, it became quiet. And they became kind of concerned, like, okay, if somebody was possibly in trouble, maybe something happened. So they both went towards the creek and decided to break up and go up the creek and down the creek, and then come around and meet back in the tree line and see if they heard or saw anything. So this Paul character's walking along the creek, and he went down towards the stream and continued up. He didn't hear anything, he didn't see anything. And then at one point, he heard this noise in the forest on the other side, and it startled him, and he slipped in the mud because it had been raining. And as he got up and was working his way out of this creek bed, he found this large footprint, a big footprint in the mud. And it startled him because it was so big. It was 14, 15 inches long, 7, 8 inches wide. And he quickly got out of the stream bed, worked his way back to the forest, and came out and met his friend, told him what he'd seen, but he told Ronald that this is Bigfoot. They leave these large footprints if you're lucky enough to find one. And they're this large, human-like animal, ape-like human animal that lives in the forest. And so Ronald's hearing this, and he's looking at this thing up in the trees, and it's frozen, motionless, like a tree stump. Hadn't he been looking exactly at it, it would have blended right in. And they're all staring at this Bigfoot in the trees, and then it turns, and it quickly runs, and they could see it running in between the trees, and it ran over the slope at this incredible pace, just really fast. And this just kind of hunched over, and these long arms swinging, and these huge strides, and they were just amazed how quickly it disappeared. Several of the men in the pipeline had guns, and they talked about taking a shot at it if it came back. It never came back. They never saw it again. The rest of their work on the pipeline, according to Ron, they never heard or saw from it again. And the parts didn't go missing. After that day, there was no more materials missing from the job site or from these pallets. Ron continued working in the pipeline all the way to the end, and it finished in 1977. But he always felt unnerved that this thing had actually come into the job site while they were gone and trying to disrupt their work. And just very hair-raising to think that this thing that he actually saw was in the job site at night. But he knew what he saw, and he knew that many of the men on this crew saw it as well. And he always remembered that experience working up in Alaska on the pipeline. That is our story from Ronald. All right, I'm going to take a quick look at these snowshoes I just got, if you guys want to see that for a minute. Okay, so I got from Sportsman's Warehouse brand new snowshoes, $79. They're called the Expedition Explorer, and this is called the 1036, which is 10 inches wide, 36 inches long, which is 3 feet. It has a capacity of 300 pounds, which is way more than I need, but with a backpack on and full gear, it might be helpful. And these snowshoes have really good bindings that have this bracket that, hear that? It clicks down like this to secure them on your boots, and then a strap on the back here. And then the bottom has these grips to grab the snow and the ice when you're going up or down a slope. And you can see that right here. But yeah, excellent snowshoe. And I really had a lot of fun today snowshoeing with them. Also, it comes with this duffel bag. Look at that. They put it all in this duffel bag here with looks like handles on it or something, and keep all your gear together. It also came with a couple of collapsible trekking poles with snow baskets, which are really essential when you're snowshoeing. So anyways, that's my Expedition snowshoes, and it says, interesting, explore, encounter, and experience. Encounter as in Bigfoot. So, all right, you guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all the comments and likes and everything like that. And we are setting the clocks forward, springing ahead this weekend. So I am really excited to get out there and do more and more adventures and activities, and obviously stories that we've been doing, campfire stories. So, all right, you guys, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one. As always, keep hiking.